I've been so busy with work these days, so I have no time to make a review video this week. I figure I'll make a short discussion video instead. Now, I love making discussion videos because I don't have to spend hours filming B-roll and weeks listening to what I have to review. Yet, the discussion videos can be as successful in terms of views as a review video. So, you know what? Maybe I should make more discussion videos instead. Now this video is going to be short because I only have one thing I wanted to talk about. This is not a video on how to achieve great soundstage. There are already too many videos out there, but rather just to give you something to think about. By the way, I've created a playlist on all the discussion videos I've done so far, and I'll put the link in the first description and comment. Fantastic. If you want to fall asleep, just load that playlist. So now before I begin, the reason I took down my last video on the SMSL VMV-A2 top of the line integrated amp is because I made a big mistake. I said hi-fi go send me the unit to review and encouraged everyone, if you're considering to buy one, to go check them out. Guess what? Turns out it was Hi-Fi Express that sent me, so no wonder that damn coupon did not work. Man, when you hit my age, you make stupid mistakes like this. Now, I deserve to be punished and eat like broccoli for a week. All this to say, if you plan to get the SMSL A2, please check out Hi-Fi Express instead. Now, I will redo the SMSL A2 integrated amp video and maybe post it up in a week with some changes. So, soundstage. The 3D imaginary space created by your two speakers. Ideally, you want the soundstage to have good depth and width, at least 6 feet deep and, going all around your speakers. Of course, if you have a properly set up system, you can easily locate all the instruments in the soundstage with good layering. Now, as I mentioned in my Gershwin speaker video, if you have good soundstage, when you close your eyes, your imagination should allow you to picture yourself able to walk around the musicians. Now, I have illustrated that with plushies in that video. Now, with some system, the musicians will feel like it has body, while others, although you can locate the musician, will feel flat. Now, I've also illustrated that in my Gershwin video by using books. Now, obviously, the soundstage will partially depend on the recording, the room, and your system. So, the one thing, I will give you something to think about, and yeah, that one thing regarding soundstage is this. Now, this actually came from a discussion I had with my audio buddy, whom I'll call Mr. Vintage, the other day. Now, for those of you who don't follow me, I call him Mr. Vintage because he mostly plays with affordable gear and vintage gear these days. Now, many systems he put together are, under $1,000, but he used to own many high-end expensive systems. So, over the years, I've heard many systems from a few $100s to $500,000. $500,000. No, not in an audio show, but actually had the privilege to sit down and listen to it seriously while eating food. What I realized is when it comes to soundstage, some audiophiles' priority is they want a big holographic 3D soundstage. Not everyone, some do. If you experience one that is properly set up, it is quite impressive. Now, the problem I encounter sometimes with some systems I hear is the soundstage is big, but the scale is wrong. Now, let me explain. Now, I have heard some systems where, the left, right, front, back, top, bottom stretches out way beyond the speaker. Really big soundstage, but everything is big. And that includes the size of the singer. So that's why Mr. Vintage asked me very early in my audio journey, can you see the lips of the singer? You remember in that other video that I discussed about being able to see the lips of the singer? Why is that important? Now, for those who have not seen that video, you know what? Let me include a link to that video in the first description and comment. What we want is to create a big soundstage and yet be able to maintain the correct size of the singer. So one test track I use is a Chinese song from from a famous Chinese singer. Now, if you're Chinese, you probably know this song. Now, in one of the songs, at one point, you hear this instrument that goes tick, 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 tick. And that instrument should be on the left side of the speaker, on the left speaker. So with some speakers, like the Monitor Audio GX300, I remember if I sit close enough, that click, click, click sound will be on my left side. So while other speakers, I feel it just next to the speaker. The reason I use this track to test is first, I need to know after tweaking my system, if that instrument is at least on the left side of the speaker. And if it is, then I check if the size of the singer is still the size of a normal person. If she is not, for me, the soundstage setup has failed. If someone took the time to tune their system to have a big soundstage, but end up with everything in the soundstage big, for sure you cannot see the lips of the singer. Then creating the illusion of the singer in your room is impossible. You might think this is obvious, but if you get to listen to as many setups as I have, not everyone gets this right. Now, some of you might not care about creating that illusion of a real singer with proper scale in your room, and I think it's 100% fine. Some audiophiles I met, they'd rather have a big wall of sound than a smaller soundstage, but with proper scale. All a question of taste. But at least one should know the difference. Now, for those of you who are new to this hobby, you can buy CDs to help you test soundstage. Now, once again, Mr. Vintage gave me this Chesky CD that was made for testing soundstage at the beginning of my audio journey. Why? Because he told me if I need to get the soundstage right if I were to go deep into this hobby. Now, in one of the test tracks, you'll hear a person walking around and he'll tell you stuff like, I'm standing behind the speaker. So when you listen to him speak, you can judge if your soundstage is realistic or not. Now, of course, there are many test CDs on the market like I have here. Man, you know what? I should have prepared it and show it to you. Let me show you a photo of it. And you can get it to fine-tune your system. I don't usually use test CDs these days because, I just listen to music. But for those who really want to know what your system can do, just know there are CDs made for that. Now, from my experience, although every component has an impact on soundstage, which includes the room, I personally like to use a tube preamp in my system because usually with a tube preamp, I get good layering. What about you? Yes, I know everything matters, but from your experience, what had the most impact on the soundstage in your system? You know what? Please put it in the comments, and because I'm curious too. So that is all I wanted to talk about soundstage today. And you know what? Given we have a bit of time, let me tell you a few stories. So I once got an email from a subscriber asking for help with his setup as he was having issues with his soundstage and center image. Well, actually it was probably more than that. And he described to me his room, which was not symmetrical. And I gave him an interesting suggestion. You see, his problem reminded me of another audio buddy of mine who had a similar problem. The suggestion was to forget to position his speakers in an equilateral triangle. So I asked him to toe in both speakers differently and place each speaker at a different distance from him. Guess what? Once he did that, he told me, you know what? The soundstage is more three-dimensional and the vocal is more centered and imaging is way better. You know what? I figure I'd share this experience with you just in case the thought has never occurred to you and you have an irregular room. Oh, remember that audio buddy of mine who had a similar problem? Well, in his case, it took him like a week to get the position perfect. He was moving it inch by inch. And if I remember correctly, he had his speakers were 300 pounds each. Now, I'm going to finish today's video with another story. Now you see I have this audio buddy called Mr. Kanta. And a while ago, at the time, he had these nice vocal Kanta speakers, and he was driving it with some really nice Mcintosh amps. Now the thing is, if you go to his home, he has like 10 amps and a few speakers. So his system is different every time I drop by. Now I remember one day, he did not tell me anything, and he just asked me to sit down and listen. I remember I was really impressed with the instrument separation. You can pinpoint each instrument clearly in the soundstage. Well, the only issue is the center image is not 100% solid, but it was incredible. And then he asked me, based on what I heard, how much would I pay for this setup, for this soundstage? Now, his main system at the time had an MSRP of over $25,000 and more. So I guess a number that is quite high, because at the time we were only used to playing with high-end gear. Turns out it was not an expensive system. You see, in front of the vocal Kanta, he had these vintage KEF 105 speakers. So what he did is he placed it very close to me, and I was sitting like 2 or 3 feet away from that setup. The KEF 105 disappeared and had amazing, amazing instrument separations. Now, for those of you who have never tried it, try it for fun. Sit close to your speakers and toe them in, and you might be very surprised by the results. It might work or it might not, depends on your system. Now, the bigger surprise was he was not driving the KEF 105 with his fancy Mcintosh. It was with an LS16 audio research preamp and a sub $1,000 Onyx integrated amp that he bought for like less than $500 on the used market. Now, at one point in my journey, I only looked at high-end gear, but I think it was around that time with experiences like this that has changed my view on entry-level gear. That is why you never see me underestimating entry-level gear. Now, for those of you who are wondering, Thomas, how can you not tell the difference between like a $10,000 vocal speaker? You see, the sound was coming around those speakers, so so I thought I was listening to those, and he did it on purpose. And how can I not tell the difference between that and a $500 KEF 105? Well, in this case, this test was done with a very specific song, which had very good recording and focuses on instrument separation. So the test did not yield the same result with other songs. Now, regardless, not the point. It was a big shock for me, and I had an important realization. Gear for me is like ingredients. In the hand of a grandmaster who knows how to cook, well, in this case, tune a system, you can create miracles. The Mr. Vintage I mentioned before enjoys doing just that. He had ultra high-end systems before, and although he can still afford high-end systems, he finds more joy and pride in tuning entry-level systems to sound amazing. Many times when Mr. Kanta or I leave his home, Mr. Vintage home, we're scratching our heads like, how? Why can it achieve that level of effect despite it being so cheap? If you ever listen to Mr. Vintage setup, the first thing you'll notice is the center image is solid and it has a good soundstage. That is why you really don't need expensive gear to create a fantastic soundstage. You do need passion, dedication, and experience. Like the other day, Mr. Vintage and Mr. Kanta told me they spent like 4 hours mixing and matching preamps. You see, what happened is that Mr. Kanta brought over a few of his preamps and they were trying to compare it to the famous vintage Marantz 7.2 preamp. So they were A/B testing it. And how did the Marantz Vintage 7 preamp perform when compared to the newer, more modern audio research preamps? It was very interesting. You know what? I should make a video on it one day. Anyways, how many people you know had that kind of passion for spending hours moving and testing gear like that? Now, of course, I'm not naive and know what a high-end system can do. But seriously, if you ever come to Mr. Vintage's place with me, you will be very, very surprised what he can do with a $50 speaker. Yeah, talking about that, yeah. They were testing those fancy preamp on a $50 speaker on that day. So what is the secret of achieving God-level soundstage? Well, at least for Mr. Vintage. Now, I'm not going to repeat the obvious stuff, like positioning, toe in, and so forth, the usual stuff. From our experience, one of the keys to getting a God level soundstage is the speaker has to match the room. That is why for me, the Gershman Avant-Garde speakers had a better soundstage than the Focal Sopra 2 in my room. Now, at one point, I had these Quad 2905 electrostatic speakers. My audio buddy, Mr. Quad, also has a pair of Quad 2905 now. We drove it with the same exact electronics down to the cable. At Mr. Quad's place, he has a cathedral soundstage. While at my place, the same speakers, 2905, were actually like, whatever, for soundstage. Now, remember the KEF 105 story I told you about with Mr. Kanta? So later on, he moved those KEF 105 to his second listening room. And he said, interestingly, he could never get that effect back again, despite using the same gear, once again, down to the same cable. So if people ask me now if they should buy stand mount or tower speakers, I would answer, if your priority is soundstage, then you have to take in consideration the size and the composition of your room. If you get the right size speaker for your room, your entry-level system can easily beat a high-end system. Well, a high-end system with the wrong setup in terms of soundstage. So, good luck in your journey to get the best possible soundstage, well, if that is important to you. By the way, I remember Ron from New Record Day had made a great video on how to position your speakers to get the best soundstage. You know what? Go check it out. And I think that's about it. Just a simple general discussion video. Don't forget to subscribe and like, and I will see you next time.